Okay. All right. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and to Chatham Movie Hour. We are back with the third installment of A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, Dream Warriors, long awaited. We are repping Daddy all day. We have merch to show you. We have lots to cover. We're going to be kind of talking about probably some of the things we've talked about in part 1 and part 2. Most importantly, we'll be roping in a lot of stuff from the documentary Never Sleep Again, which we cannot recommend highly enough. We'll link it in the description. But without further ado, grab a cocktail. We're going to cheers to our favorite, to the man of our dreams. Cheers.
Cheers. This will have wine in it in a little bit, but cheers.
It better. It better. Yeah. And yes, please.
Yes. Show and tell first.
Please.
Should we? Just to get it out of the way. Otherwise, I'll forget.
You're the master.
We both have our Freddy shirts on.
Yes.
I have a Nightmare 3 shirt, the Dare shirt that is popular online. Yes. A great moment from the film that we are about to discuss. And this is the NECA figure from the film that we're about to discuss. Nice. Look at that.
Is that the chest with the baby souls in it?
Yes, it has the chest, and it has it'll be hard to see, but it has an interchangeable head with the cross burn on it.
Love it.
And it has a puppet, Freddy, from when he turns into the puppet.
Love it.
Which is actually one of my favorite scenes. And it has
the house.
Yeah.
And I love how like articulated his hand is in that figure.
It's a really good one. I love this one.
Fantastic. Chef's kiss all the way.
And then I have something very exciting to show and tell. But this, so on our previous Nightmare Movie Hour, I said that the 1/4 scale Freddy was like my prized possession. In terms of figures, yes, but this has got to take the cake. So this is an actual script of Nightmare on Elm Street 3 that I keep in this acrylic box. It was not signed at all when I got it. I used to work for a Halloween costume shop in LA, and someone who knew someone who worked on the movie brought it in, believe it or not, as a thank you for service. And I was completely blown away. We just had this conversation about how I love Freddy, and he's like, "Oh, I have this. Would you want it?" I'm like, Are you insane? Yes, I want it. It's a real script. It has like the different color pages, the revisions. This revision says 10/06/86. Anyway, so I brought it with me to Texas Frightmare Weekend last year. No, sorry, 2 years ago, 2019, well before the pandemic. And I got Nancy, Freddie, and Kristen's mom to sign it. So Kristen's mom signed it. Hi, Chad. Kristen, you ruin everything. And Freddie signed it. Welcome to Primetime, bitch. And Heather signed it. You're the last of the Elm Street children.
Love that.
And it has got to be not just of Nightmare, but a prized possession for me of anything I own. It's probably worth a lot less because I got them all to sign it to Chad. So like it won't sell on well, but that's not my goal with this. My goal is to keep it forever. So yeah, it's amazing.
Gorgeous.
And I had met Robert Englund before, but this is my second time meeting him. But the first time was very uneventful because they rushed us through. So I didn't really get any time with him. I didn't really he just signed my box set real quick. This, he actually, if you can see, he drew. Yeah. And he's well known for doing his caricatures. So he did a caricature of Freddy.
So awesome.
And he was actually worn out because it was the then. Anyway, long story short, feel like my mom, turning into my mom.
It's all right. We're excited and we're old.
Yeah, that was my first time meeting Heather Langenkamp, who as you know,
sure.
I love as much as Robert Englund, which is not typical of the fan base. Usually everyone's like Robert Englund, and yeah, we like Nancy too. I'm like Nancy and Robert. Heather and Robert Englund are on the same level for me. I just love them both so much. But yeah, so that's my show and tell, and now we can begin.
Well, yeah, I've had the pleasure of seeing the script of yours in real life, and it's definitely it's an epic piece of memorabilia to own, and your collection is dare I say iconic.
It
Yeah,
was really cool when she autographed it, because she really took her time to like look through it first
oh
and
wow,
read a few passages. I mean, she spent a few minutes just leafing
awesome.
through it, and just like you could tell in her mind, like going back down memory lane, and just she thought it was as cool as like a fan would, and I was just like, I was just, I was a happy day.
Yeah, that I mean, it's I've only met a few people in real life, celebrities, but it's always amazing when you have to imagine they're exhausted and this is not their first rodeo, and
Yeah.
it's always amazing when they recognize the importance of their characters and like fan boy or fangirl over it with you. Like that's such like a meaningful thing.
Yeah, and it's got to be hard, like you said, for them to do it like day in, day out for thousands of people, and to
No.
keep up that level of genuine, like, I guess, interest in
Yeah.
wanting to do that. Yeah. But
Yeah. Well, speaking of Heather Langenkamp, she makes her return to the franchise in part three. We know part two, which is my favorite. It's an unpopular opinion to have, but part two was just this asterisk aside of a movie. Like it offered nothing to the plot. It's its own kind of just hot mess. But the great thing about part three, Dream Warriors, we get your queen, Heather Langenkamp, aka Nancy, back as the intern psychiatrist at the mental institution. And yeah, so we have a return to the mythology with Dream Warriors. And I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how the story came together, because it I just found out recently. I guess when I first watched Never Sleep Again, this kind of was lost on me. But when I rewatched it, I learned that Wes Craven and Frank Darabont wrote the original script, or were trying to write a script for part three that was very dark, very serious. And
right.
Frank Darabont is most famous for having directed The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, and here we have this blast from the past, random Frank Darabont script that we will never see the light of day. And also Robert Englund wrote a treatment for it. So do you
Yes.
want to talk to us a little bit about like what could have been?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Normally, I'm the guy that says, "Oh, if only they had done it how they were gonna do it," because that's
Yeah,
usually the case. But in this case, I'm not so sure, because the whole popularity of Freddie and him becoming that over the top guy that became more of a pop culture figure was really dependent on how they made this third film. This third film brought him into humor. It was more adventurous. It was more fun. It was still, had some elements of horror, but it was more fantasy interjected, more adventure interjected. And all of a sudden, Freddy's making jokes for the first time, which
right.
is awesome. It's different than the first, but I like them equally. I mean, I really like Dark Freddy. I really like Funny Freddy. I think after a while, we had Dark Freddy 2 movies in a row. I
Right.
think it was really appropriate to go that other direction. And look, it's what really made the franchise as iconic as it became. And to speak on the origins, originally Wes was going to write, and well, he did write a script for it that New Line sort of greenlit.
Hmm.
Didn't go into production, but they signed a deal with him, I think, based on that, or they showed interest. He went to Heather Langenkamp, called her, and said, "I'm gonna direct this. Will you be in it?" And she was really excited to be in his version of it. It was gonna be so dark, though, that it was gonna try to be darker than the first two, even.
Right.
Which normally I'm all about it, but like I said, I think they really went the wise route with this. But like he was gonna say like the C word, cunt, a bunch of times, and stuff like that. And they were just going to take it like as dark as humanly possible, which is interesting. And I do think the roots of him are that dark. And um, as we know, he was originally a child molester. You cannot get darker than that. Right. And they sort of smoothed that over when they did the first film because of some stories that were in the news, and they just got cold feet at the last minute. But originally it was going to be more implicit in that first film that he was a child molester. Right. Anyway, I think he really wanted to go back and double down like on the darkness. And they said that his version would have just been like way over budget, like there were no rules to Freddy, blah blah blah. So they started rewriting it with a few different people. And one person early on that submitted a script was Robert Englund, and his was called Funhouse. And I just love that idea of like the Funhouse. I mean, that could have been really cool too. But I think that would have ended up more like part 2, where it's more of like an anomaly, not like a kickstart that really solidified the franchise.
Right.
I mean, don't ask me why. It just sounds a little more gimmicky, but I mean, so that's the backstory. But I really like the direction that they went.
I agree. And I mean, it's widely accepted as being the best of the franchise.
Except for me.
Popularly and I guess critically speaking, it is. But yeah, it isn't for me. I love it, but I mean, y'all know where I stand on part 2. Right. But you know, in terms of like movies within the franchise that aren't part 2, Freddy's Dead, I think is the best. New Nightmare, of course, Chef's Kiss, but I also kind of think of that as like an epilogue. But you know, with this, you know, we have, like we talked about, like the return to canon, and the credits open with a quote from Edgar Allan Poe. Sleep, those little slices of death, how I loathe them, is how we are introduced to part 3. And of course, we get a new heroine, played by Patricia Arquette, which, her first role, I think?
Ever. Yeah.
To Never Sleep Again. And we know that she had to do like 52 takes in her first scene because she couldn't remember her lines. So she was definitely a little baby. Allegedly.
There was a lot. 50 sounds high, but
it does sound high. You'd have to, and it was literally like 2 lines. But yeah, I mean, it's the Never Sleep Again. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Waiting till like 4:30 in the morning to film that scene, and it was like her first scene in a big movie. Yeah. But we all know she's amazing. I mean, look what she's gone on to do. She's incredible.
She is. And we learn in the Never Sleep Again documentary, which we will reference ad nauseum, is that the director, Chuck, do you know his last name? I don't have it pulled up, but this was his first time directing as well. And apparently he wasn't a really great communicator, so he kept actors waiting. Hence, really stressful filming situation that Heather Langenkamp spoke about in the documentary as well.
Right.
But Patricia Arquette is fantastic in this.
The director's name is Chuck Russell.
Russell, okay.
This was his second film, actually.
Oh, but okay.
You could still put him in the inexperienced category. He'd only done one film, Dreamscape, which I think competed against Nightmare, a previous Nightmare film. Like actually the first film. So the legend goes that Wes was shopping the idea of his script for Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, around Hollywood. Everyone just passed on it until finally New Line picked it up. One of the studios that passed on it was the studio that made Dreamscape. And the reason that was 20th Century Fox, so they missed out on the whole franchise. Fox. Yeah. But the reason they passed, they're like, oh, we already have like a Dream movie coming out soon. It's called Dreamscape. So, which no one even like thinks of now. I mean, that movie is like garbage compared to Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
I mean, I've seen it. I think I can't even remember it though, and it's like it's a real whatever film. And so, I mean,
well, if you don't remember it, then that's all we need to know.
History is so riddled with those like stories about like a record company or a movie studio like missing out on the big person. Yeah. I don't know if I always find that interesting, but definitely 20th Century Fox, and I'm sure a lot of other studios missed out on Wes Craven and Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, what could have been. Yeah, and we talk about this a lot in our Alien franchise movie hours, and specifically, we will be talking about in our deep dive into the documentary about the making of Alien, which is like this confluence of right place, right time, synchronicities, and that's reminding me of like something they do say in that documentary, but also kind of gets said in so many words in Never Sleep Again, which is that, to your earlier point about why we didn't go with Robert Englund's treatment of this part 3, is that it was so dark and it was going to make it very implicit that he is a pedophile. And during the time that this movie came out in the early 80s, there was a cultural zeitgeist of like the fear of children being taken, of kidnapping. Like that was every after school special. So naturally the studio, shied away from that.
Right.
But it's still very telling that this franchise was in its prime during the 80s, when you have this tension around children disappearing. So it is very much a product of its time, and it's, whether consciously or not, the franchise is commenting on that.
Right.
And they do talk about that, to a certain extent in Never Sleep Again. And even in part 3, though, they refer to Freddy as a child murderer. I don't even think they use the word pedophile. Maybe once. I don't even think they do. So it's all still very like suggestive. Like, did
Right.
he or didn't he? But yeah, I mean.
And before we move on from the director, I just want to say that the film he did after this film is called The Blob, and it's of course a remake of the classic movie The Blob, but it's the 80s version, and that's a fan favorite of a lot of like horror fans. So that it's just like a unique film. It's not the best film, but the effects of The Blob were like really amazing at the time. So a lot of people who are fans of practical effects definitely check out The Blob. When it's like ripping people, like dissolving them in real time, it's so cool.
Yeah, and speaking of effects, this movie is very effects heavy. And from what I understand, again, from Never Sleep Again, is that they had a reasonable budget for part 3, and the majority of that money went to all of these practical and special effects. Because you have probably more incarnations of Freddy in this than you had in the prior 2 movies combined. You have Snake Freddy, you have blonde bombshell Freddy, you have Needles Freddy, you have TV Freddy, you have homeless man Freddy. So and then you have the paper mache house, which is used as a practical and special effect in the opening of the film and throughout, and even in the doc and video, which we can get to. But yeah, this movie is very effects heavy. Like, did you think that was like an asset to the movie, or did you feel like, okay,
No,
we get it, it's overkill?
I definitely did think that they nailed a lot of the effects. I think that like in particular, I love the effect where Freddy becomes a puppet and he leads one of the kids out by his tendons that are ripped from his arms.
Yes.
And the makeup on that looks great. And then he's marionetted basically with his arm and leg tendons out onto a ledge to like fall to his death. And Freddy is looming in the sky over him and goes like that, and with his claws cuts the strings and he falls. And all of that I think looks so good. And I just think like a lot of the effects are really good. There's some that are just so, of course it's because it's an older film. But I would say like all things considered, they did an amazing job.
Yeah. I will say that Snake Freddy is an abomination. I don't like it.
I love it.
You do?
Yeah.
I like the idea of it, but it just like, I mean, they're all ridiculous. They're all ridiculous, but like that one is just like, I that and the soul chest, like the children being stuck in his chest. Like, yeah. I appreciate it, but it's just like, come on, it's like too much.
It's too much. Well, and that one looks a little hokey now when you see it, of course, but you gotta think
of its time.
Yeah, and there's some effects that are really seamless, like when he cuts um
Joey?
mom's head off.
Oh, yeah.
Still talking and moving with the head, and it's like
Yeah.
perfect. But no, this is way before CGI. So there, and then when Kristen is in the bathroom and the faucets, the faucet handles become his hands. When they come up, they look like what you would expect, which is those copper
Like
pipes.
Yeah.
But they're like a bone. If you look closely, like an arm bone, you know how it like it's like you know how like an arm bone would look.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. There's like the two bones. Yeah.
bone. Yeah. So that was just such like a subtle, cool detail that it was that like copper piping, but I just really like that for some reason. And then yeah, but some of them still don't hold up as well, but you can't really fault it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, for its time, it was definitely amazing. I really love the TV kill death scene where I forget the character's name. Is it Rebecca? She's trying to stay awake in the TV room, and she clearly fails. And Freddy comes out of the TV with antennas coming out of his head and arms, made of wires come out, and then he like pulls her in and just like electrocutes her essentially. That's one of my favorite kills.
Yeah.
And your shirt is my favorite kill, possibly of the franchise.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So we have to talk about Taryn too.
Yes. Who I've met also. I've met her. So Jennifer is the one that gets put into the TV. Jennifer. That's her character's name, played by Penelope Sudrow. And that is probably the most popular death scene in the whole franchise for fans. It's definitely one of my all-time favorite death scenes in any film.
Really?
Incredible. Robert Englund notoriously has shared that he improvised or rewrote that line to the classic "Welcome to Prime Time, bitch," and it was originally something else. And so he's like, I'm responsible for that line. Apparently he doesn't, write a lot of his lines or improvise a lot, but that was one famous instance of him improvising. Some people say it's the only line he ever improvised or wrote. That cannot be true.
I can't accept that. I won't accept that.
It's funny how these facts get like twisted to be like more interesting when they're plenty interesting on their own. But anyway, because we don't have proof that he didn't like improvise another line in the 7 or 8 films. I mean, get real. But yeah, I love that scene so much. That the effects in that scene are perfect. The dialogue in that scene is perfect. The atmosphere in that scene is perfect. The acting is perfect. The concept is perfect. I mean, I just love it. I love his biomechanical arms that come out that are all like robotic. They grab her and then I love how she looks when Lawrence Fishburne, who blows my mind that he's in this movie. He's amazing.
Max.
Apocalypse Now, the whole thing, Matrix, yes. But so he finds her. He has like a throwaway role, unfortunately, kind of. But it's still great to have him in this. And when he finds her, of course, she's really high off the ground because it's one of those like waiting room TVs, like high up to the ceiling.
Mounted up, yeah.
Her head is just like in there, like broken through the set, and it's all like, it looks amazing how they styled it. And it makes you wonder, like, how do you explain that as a suicide? What, did she just like jump really high? Like how did they explain it later on? They just called it a suicide.
Well, that'd
be impossible.
It's that harkens back to like one of the main themes of the franchise is that adults are idiots and they're in denial and they don't listen to children and denial, like rationalizations at every turn. And that reminds me, like, the acting in this, within its context, within its time, I think is fantastic. Like, I think the kids do a great job. Of course, the only person that does a shit job to me is like the main doctor, like the main protagonist male. Like he's no good.
Oh my
But
God.
all the kids are amazing.
We're so on the same page. It's not even funny. I was gonna say the same thing. Someone on YouTube calls him not Bill Maher because he looks like Bill Maher, but he's not. So just call him not Bill Maher. But he is because Bill Maher was in a lot of like silly films in the 80s. He would pop up in things. So he is one of the major problems with this movie. I'm just gonna say it. I don't really hate him as an actor, but there's a lot of character things going on that just don't seem right.
Yeah.
Like you almost expect him and Heather to form a more romantic relationship because that's like a movie trope and it doesn't happen. So I don't know if it's good that it doesn't happen and avoids that trope, or if it's like they should have done that.
Yeah, but because they build to it and then it just doesn't happen.
Right. I think that's the problem. If they hadn't kind of almost hinted or alluded to it, there'd be no problem. But yes, it did feel that way. And then there's so many issues with this guy. Like when they go see her father, John Saxon, who returns to this movie, who I love. He's amazing.
Yes.
He's like blind, stinking drunk. Like he's drinking his sorrows away because his wife was killed by Freddy, which by the way, it's just weird because in the first movie, she dies by going into the bed. But then the last scene, she's fine again. Remember?
Well, wasn't that the dream? Wasn't that the dream sequence? So it wasn't real?
That last scene of the first film, I don't think was a dream sequence. I think just Freddy came back.
Freddy was in the real world.
No, you're right. It had to have been a dream sequence, but it's implied that who dies in a dream dies in real life. I don't know.
Okay, all right, but I'm with you. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But anyway, so they're acknowledging she did die, which she dies a couple of times at the end of that movie, I guess. So she's pretty dead. And so
if the franchise teaches you anything, it's that you can always die more.
That's right. So not Bill Maher approaches John Saxon in the bar with Nancy, and he's drunk, he's evasive, he's non-committal, and then so he like knocks over a table and like throws him up against the wall, and this is like a thin, like not cool guy. I'm not buying it. John Saxon will beat your ass, son.
Yes.
I'm sorry. And he's drunk. And it's like some 40-year-old guy with his daughter who he doesn't know. Yeah. Like he got lucky that John Saxon didn't open a can of whoop ass on him.
Yeah. May he rest in peace. Yeah, not Bill Maher was not coming correct in this film. Like
No. And then he has him drive.
He had him drive, he did.
Like drive. No, you drive.
And then you literally see him pouring out his bottle of whiskey when they arrive at the church. It's like,
oh my God.
Why didn't you drive?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, the acting, with the exception of not Bill Maher, I think is great. And I mean, I want to kind of talk about Taryn and I want to talk about Kincaid, but there's just as like a segue, like this movie really does for the franchise, emphasize and like kind of beat the point that like the parents are the real villain in a sense. Freddy is a byproduct of, I mean, he's evil in his own right, but the parents are a secondary villain and are evil in their own right. And in Never Sleep Again, I'm not sure who was quoted as saying this, but they say that the movie Part 3 is a horror riff on adolescence. Not everything adults told you was true. And the entire movie is just like the kids are trying to tell their doctors and their parents, we're having a group, you keep saying we're having a group delusion, but we were all having this dream of this guy before we ever met each other. And so you have this like, you have throughout the franchise, in my opinion, a lot of gaslighting going on, which I think is brilliant, both by adults towards children. And the only person, ironically, that's honest is the pedophile, is the evil monster. he's exactly what you expect him to be. Like you, and he's not meant to be trusted, but the people that you are meant to trust and to are supposed to protect you are not hearing or seeing you, and are really just trying to protect their own asses for burning this guy alive. Um, and I think this movie really articulates that theme of the franchise really well. But I wanted to ask your thoughts because it's very Jungian, if I may, like the whole entire franchise obviously being dream based thematically. But in this movie, you know, we see Freddy kind of in and out of the dream world for the first time, um, more, I guess, than in part one and part two. But I wanted to ask your like thoughts on that.
Well, they say that in part two he was way more out of the dream world, and then in this he's always within the dream world, because anytime you see him, it's within the context of a dream, if I'm not mistaken in this film. But that he definitely has way more fluidity and freedom of characterization, like
Yes.
what he can transform into, how creative his kills get. That's what I love about this franchise, is how creative the kills can get. And that's down to good writing, you know, the TV kill, the puppet marionette kill. Those are just like great ideas that you could never do in Friday the 13th or Halloween,
Right.
because they're not dream based. So they don't
Right.
have that level of freedom and creativity. And I think that what I've heard a lot is that the first two films don't take advantage of that. The fact that in a dream, there's so much more fantasy element of anything is possible.
Right.
And due to limitations or budget or whatever, they couldn't really go there as much, and they were able to like really go there in this film, which I think is really nice. It's just satisfying. And I think, don't you let me know what you think, but just as a teenager or a young person watching these movies, you so identify with them because of none of the adults listening, and because they're your peers, and it really helps to put you in the situation more, which is amazing. And I think this film does that almost the best in the franchise up until this point, of you really you know, getting in there with them and identifying with them, and just feeling those feelings that are so common to every teenager to feel.
Yes.
Just not being fully understood by the generational gap between parent and child and stuff like that.
Yes. And like, I mean, there's so much gaslighting going on. I mean, even to the point where Dr. Sims, played by the amazing actress, I can't think of her name, but she was in Carrie, and she's just been in so many great things, who plays like the head psychiatrist, says that you're having these dreams of this guy due to your own shame and moral guilt. And you know, these are just adolescent kids. I mean, you know, it, thank you. She is, dare I say, iconic. But yeah, it's interesting. Two things that you mentioned, like this movie is commenting on mental health as well, and I don't think it. Hindsight is 2020, right? Like this movie has really got a lot to say about gaslighting and mental health, and just the
Yeah.
just the way that children and young adults are dismissed because they're not adults. And I don't think that was the agenda. I think that's just kind of, you know, we're kind of retconning that and putting that lens on it, but it's kind of hard not to see that. And to your point about, you know, this movie really giving space to like the dream space and how much you can do with that with the movie and the narrative. And this movie is called Dream Warriors because one of the plot points is that when they are unconscious, they can access skills that they don't have in real life, whether it's walking or, you know, not sleepwalking or
doing,
you know,
a round off like
kung
most people
fu.
in life can do.
Yeah, that was the
So
one that
lame.
I hated that they gave Kristen kung fu skills. Like,
Not even kung
why?
fu, not even like, because kung fu is like an art form. I mean, that would have even been cooler than what she was like doing, like
Gymnastics.
gymnastics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, let me tell you, as for creative as they got with the skills, they lacked all creativity in this area.
Yeah.
The guy that's like the Dungeons and Dragons guy, his costume was so shitty.
The
Whatever.
Wizard Master. The
It was
Wizard
so
Master.
lame. And then like when Taryn's like, I'm beautiful and bad.
And bad.
I think that's like the worst line in the whole series.
Yeah.
So for me, all the major problems are around this one little area that you just brought up, which is that first of all, that's a new concept. It wasn't in the first or second film.
Right.
You know, these like dream skills, like it wasn't needed. It was one step too much. It was too far.
Okay.
We didn't need that.
Okay.
And all their costumes are whack ass silly. All of their superpowers are ridiculous and stupid. And like, why would you ask for some of these superpowers? No, I want the superpowers of gymnastics. I could learn that in real life. If I can do it easily in real life, I don't want it to be my dream skill. And I don't
facts.
The title of the film being Dream Warriors, because I think that's a cheesy title. I mean, it probably played well at the time. I mean, it is a, I guess, a kind of a catchy title, but the title indicates the thing I like least about the film. So for that reason, I'll even love the title. But
see, I think like conceptually it's a good idea. It was not executed well, right? Like their skills are stupid. Yeah. Like what's his face was a Dungeons and Dragons nerd, so his superpower in the dreams realm is that he can become a wizard who walks because he's paralyzed, and he can use wizard, like he can shoot lasers out of his fingers and harm Freddy.
Like the one guy who's a mute, he can scream.
Right.
Like these are not cool superpowers.
Right.
And it really flies in the face of the rules that were set out for this franchise in 1 and 2. I mean, I think it's a neglectful departure of the rules of this universe that was made.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Just to do something new, basically.
Yeah, and again, going back to like cool idea, poor execution. You have Heather Langenkamp as Nancy returning as a psychiatrist specializing in dreams, which I think is brilliant. And they could have made their Dream Warrior skill set more sophisticated as well, because we know that Kristen, played by Patricia Arquette, has this ability to bring people into her dream. So why didn't they stop there? Like, there's your superpower. You don't need to do roundhouse kicks. Like, that's your superpower. And they didn't really.
That's a great point.
They kind of, it was just like, oh, she can do that. But like, that's how she was able to bring everyone into the group dream.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Got like multiple gifts, like they were making fun of that on a YouTube video that I sent you, where she's like, "I'm beautiful." Okay, that's your gift, and she's like, "And bad." No, now you have 2 gifts, and the one guy, he can walk and he's a wizard, but then like Kristen, it just does shitty gymnastics. Like,
yeah,
But yeah, I see what you're saying. Like a much more powerful element is if they would have maximized more scenes around her ability to bring people into her dream, because that's really powerful.
Yeah,
and I want to talk about Heather Langenkamp's hair, because as a gay man, I'm all about women's hair.
I have the outfit she wears to the funeral. We have to talk about that.
Oh, it's everything. First of all, she's a woman now. She's not a girl anymore. I think she was 20 in the first one, but she was playing like 17 or whatever. Right. So she's playing down. Now she's actually playing up a little bit, and she almost looks like a 20-year-old trying to dress like a 30-year-old, because she still looks very young. But her hair is more under control. She still has the silver streak from the first movie.
Yes.
Which is a whole thing. But to me, she still hasn't come into her beauty yet, but she's like halfway there. And then when you see Wes Craven's New Nightmare, the 7th film, it's like supermodel transformation.
She's gorgeous.
Insanely come into all of her powers as a woman and all of her beauty. Yes. It's just breathtaking to me. I
And
find
Heather
her
Lang,
beautiful in all three films, but there's clearly a
right?
progression.
She's in her agency in New Nightmare, and
Yes.
Heather Langenkamp has that beautiful, very short upper lip to where her top teeth are exposed. That is just love
Yes.
that.
Her mouth, and I think
Yeah, her mouth is gorgeous.
she's aged so well. I mean, she's only become more beautiful
I
clearly
agree.
throughout those three films.
Yeah,
So
the outfit that she wears
hair,
to. Oh,
her
her hair. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
hair is finally like fully tamed and fully glamorous and fully like intentional. Whereas in the first two films, it's like her hair is its own character
A lot of
throughout the series.
volume. It has a lot of volume.
A lot of volume, and the second one a little bit less, but it's still really there. It's better cut though. It's better cut. And then the third one is like I said, it's just like so styled.
I have to rewatch it now just to watch her hair. Yeah, the outfit she wears at the funeral, I forget which kid's funeral it is, but she's wearing like this beautiful black hat that's kind of tilted and this like gray shawl, and it's just like she looks like she came from Fashion Week, and I was just like, you know, and not Phil.
It's almost too much, right? Like would the real Dr. Nancy have done that? Like
no,
the real
it was too glam. It was too glam.
It's too glam, but I'm here for it. Some things don't have to make sense because they're a gift.
Thank you. Just like the rain and Alien, or you know, like it fucking looks good. Shut up, it looks good.
Yes, I could go on a whole rant about the rain and Alien because condensation. You could make a case for that.
Yes, there's obviously air conditioning on the fucking spaceship, so why can't that be coolant of some kind?
Or I'm sure they have a huge water supply. That could have been like a filtration situation.
You can have condensation, okay?
Solved.
Masters in physics right here. Okay, so I just want to talk about like the dream, like the mythology of dreams a little bit more in this. So, I mean, there's some epic quotes, and I want to get to Taryn's kill scene and Kincaid a little bit more, but you mentioned earlier, yes, I swear, like Dope Daddy Freddy, that's me.
Get me high.
And also hot like guy that's banging mom, Tuxedo Freddy that decapitates mommy.
Yeah.
Mommy loves that. Freddy in a tux.
Like I know drugs are bad, but for Freddy in that moment, I maybe would.
No.
Like,
Yes, you would. You would. Okay. In that scene, in the scene where Taryn has the battle with Freddy, and it's like an alley, and he pulls out the hypodermic thingies, the homeless guy that walks by her, tell me that motherfucker does not look like the captain from Jaws. I had to IMDb it, and it wasn't, but I was just like, that is.
My brain kept going to, is that Freddy dressed as a bum?
That's what I thought, yeah.
But it wasn't.
It was great misdirection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's supposed to be such a badass, but then she's like not at all a badass in the scene. She just barely even gets anything in. She just comes across so lame.
Yeah, they didn't have to go with like the punk goth thing. It was a little bit.
That dated really quickly, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
I will say this. I said I met her in real life here at an event, and she was so amazing. She's like so cool with the fans. I mean, they all are, and it must be cool to be able to do those things, but also I'm sure really draining. But she was just amazing. Like she was not at all concerned about making money off people. She just hung out with everybody and was so accessible and so cool.
That's amazing.
And so super nice. So I can't say anything bad about her. But I prefer her in this film when she's being her character initially, not her dream character.
Right.
Her initial character where she has a past and she's struggling with drugs or addiction, I should say. To me, that comes across better than the whole goth dream warrior. I just don't like the dream warriors though, personally.
Yeah, the more we talk about it, the more it just like falls apart and doesn't work. And
Except
it's
the song.
ironic. But it's ironic that this is like the fan favorite, you know? Like,
I know, I don't understand that because it's never been my favorite. It's a gift in a lot of ways because we got Wes Craven back as a writer. We got Heather Langenkamp back as an actor. We got a lot more visual treats in this and
yes.
abilities that we didn't have. But like I said, the not Bill Maher stuff, the Dream Warrior stuff, this one to me feels really 80s too, like even more than the other ones somehow. Like
Yeah.
it's dated in certain ways, but I think of this film as like a film that is littered with really cool moments. But
Yes.
to me, it's just not a great film. Personally.
Named. Yeah, named. Like even like the Dick Cavett kill, where you have Dick Cavett as a guest star in Zsa Zsa Gabor, and you learn this is so like misogynistic and horrible, but in Never Sleep Again, you learn that when they approached Dick Cavett about this, he says, I'll only, and then they were like, well, who do you want to play your guest on the show? And he said Zsa Zsa Gabor because she's the dumbest person I've ever met, and I would never really interview her.
Oh, that's great.
So I want to see her get killed. It's like, wait a second, this feels very problematic, and I like, it's great, but it's also like, what?
I know. It's great though. But
it's one of the best kills in the movie too.
It is fantastic. And as a huge fan of Zsa Zsa Gabor and Green Acres, I just have to say I loved it. I just thought it was so funny and tongue in cheek, and I think he was playing into that in that interview, certainly. But
yeah,
I that's a great moment. And what's so cool is it prefaces an even greater moment. So it's right before the TV kill, and then when he becomes Freddy, the TV like loses signal, right? Mm-hmm. But the snow in the TV when it turns to snow, like Freddy's red and green pattern in a way, right? Like really distorted. Just subtle stuff like that is so well done in this.
Yeah, that's also just really great fan service too, because those details are what we pay attention to. There's like going back to what's his face, that the paralyzed young gentleman who's not paralyzed in the dream realm. Okay. Like that should have been a superpower right there, that he can walk in his dreams, right? But no, they had to make him a Dungeons and Dragons master. But it leads to one of the best quotes. Go ahead.
Well, I don't interrupt, but I just want to say, okay, it's really nice that he can walk because he can't walk in real life. But again, if you could do anything,
right,
I'd rather be in the chair but have like a really cool superpower or something. I don't know.
I agree.
Like, maybe he can just walk as the byproduct of it being a dream, and that's not the power.
Right.
But the power is something like really cool, which is kind of what they did, except they went so lame with it.
Yeah.
With like the green voltage that he shoots out.
It's ridiculous.
Of course, this is pre Harry Potter, but it so likens to that and all that stuff. Yeah. But not as cool.
I think it was because in Never Sleep Again, when they're interviewing the actor who plays him, he talks about how he was a Dungeons and Dragons fan in real life. And Dungeons and Dragons, I mean, it's obviously still extremely popular, but in the 80s, that was like, it went peak D&D moment. So it's cool that they kind of played into that idea. It just, again, wasn't executed well.
Execution.
And it looks like he's wearing a Dracula costume, not a wizard costume. Like, it's got like the collar.
It's terrible. I don't think any costume of a wizard on him was ever gonna be successful.
Okay.
Oh, but I do like that he was so into Dungeons and Dragons. But I just wish like he had summoned a dragon on him or something. I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
the sky's not the limit with a $4.6 million budget, but still.
Right. But like shooting lasers wasn't the way to go.
No. And then he just gets knifed in the heart with the glove. I mean, which so many people have died that way, or that's just such a whatever way to go.
Yeah, the only good thing about it for me was it led to a great quote from Freddy, which is, "I don't believe in fairy tales." And like, I loved that. I loved that as a comeback, and I love, fairy tale in the context of this dream world.
Right. But back to Taryn real quick. I love, of course, this scene where he says, "Let's get high," and I haven't heard this discussed in any of the makings of, and I'm a bad fan for not knowing for sure.
Mhm.
But I'm positive that they're pitch shifting Robert Englund's voice down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when you hear him say, and there's sometimes they forget to do it, and his voice is a much higher timbre. But specifically when he's like, "Let's get high," it's like, "Let's get high." It's like so deep.
Yeah.
And it sounds so good though. It's like under his breath a little bit, and it's so deep that I think they pitched it down because it sounds like really natural but really deep, and his voice is not. And then in other scenes he doesn't quite sound like that. But I love the needle fingers. I just think it's such a great like riff on the glove.
Yeah.
And like the glove is so iconic and so cool. And like, how do you take that to like a different dimension, right? Make them needles, and that's her weakness anyway. And then her
track marks
becoming the like hungry little suction cups. Like,
yes, brilliant. Brilliant. That's brilliant. And the execution of the hypodermic needle gloves were it just looked good too. It didn't look shitty. It looked good. And Freddie as a dope dealer. Yeah, I love how both of those gloves are really well articulated.
Yeah.
But like Freddie as like a dope dealer also just kind of fucking works. And
the fact that he's preying on her darkest weakness, and there was something so sexy about that scene.
Okay, I was just gonna say in part 3, Daddy is serving sex.
Yes.
Like, tuxedo Daddy, dope fiend Daddy. Like,
I think, like, of course you don't want her to be a drug addict. Of course you don't. I mean, the rational part of you. But there's something so sexy, a la like however you want to 50 Shades of Grey it or whatever.
Daddy is sexy.
Like,
listen.
Yeah, giving into something you know is going to feel good, even if it's terrible for you, that's incredibly sexy.
Yes. And there's another layer to that scene, which I don't know if they did this consciously or not. They probably didn't, but dope dreams, which, you know, as a child of somebody who is a recovered addict, I've come to learn like just how powerful dope dreams are when you are in both the throes of addiction and in recovery. And this is a franchise about the power of dreams and how they will kill you. And it's a very interesting, if you look at that scene or that part of the movie through that like more serious lens. I mean, it just reinforces how strong the theme of this horror franchise is, that it does speak to all of those dark, shadowy parts of our subconscious, and you can make it as silly as you want, or you can really read into, well, this is a real thing that people deal with, and it just masterful storytelling.
And while we're at it, I just want to say that I find someone else very sexy in this movie. And it's the character of Joey.
Joey?
Yes. Yeah. And did you see his interviews in Never Sleep Again, where he looks virtually the same?
Yeah,
but
he
like
doesn't age.
Sexier and just more grown up. But like that guy is so hot. I'm sorry. I don't know how old he was when they filmed this, but anyway, he grew up to be very hot and amazing. And I just thought he was so cute. Of course, when I was his age, I thought he was cute. And it's hard for him to be strong in this film because he's a mute, so he doesn't get lines, so he has to play everything like however. But people make fun of his mullet, but I think it's fine. It's fine. He's so cute, and I cannot believe how well he has aged. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, he looks the same.
He looks the same. I'm like, how is that possible?
And you were talking about earlier the movie, or yes, the treatment of the script that Robert Englund wanted to do was going to be titled Funhouse. And it's interesting that there is a little bit of a fun house scene in the end where there's like this hall of mirrors where Freddy like replicates himself in all of these mirrors so he can kill everybody at once. And the thing that breaks that illusion is when Joey does use his voice for the first time and he screams and the glass shatters. So you have like a little bit of a full circle moment there. But
like that's so lame though. Like I can scream, I can do a round off, like I can walk. Like what?
This movie is not winning any Golden Globes. Like, it's not getting any SAGs.
To me, those are things that are inspiring if they could get to do them in real life. But as a dream warrior, not appropriate. Like something's way off here.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Kincaid. But
the Parker / Yaphet Kotto of this film.
He does, right? All right. Okay. So we have to talk about Kincaid. I personally think he's the best character in the movie and arguably the franchise outside of Nancy and Fred. He has some of the best one-liners in the movie. He even references Dreamland when he's like, let's get this motherfucker or whatever in this Dreamland. I forget exactly when he says it, but
when he calls Freddy a pussy.
Yes.
He's like, Kruger, pussy.
So good. He's so good. And like going back to your point of like ridiculous like dream warrior skill sets, he can bend metal, like he's just like
when
stronger.
He bends the chair, that's so lame.
He's just stronger.
It's almost like they just thought of the whole Dream Warrior thing at the end after they'd already written the script and then went back and just like real quick, like let's just put shit in there.
It feels like it.
None of it's well thought out.
I mean, it would even have made sense if like he was into wrestling or bodybuilding, but there's not even like a single reference to like him wanting.
He says that when they were casting, they were looking for like a well-built guy. And he's like, oh, well, that's not me, but I'm going to go anyway. And I'm just going to be like tough, you know? And
yeah,
he does that really authentically in the film and really well. Being tough, but not where it doesn't feel fake. It feels really authentic to him. And my whole thing with him, because people say like exactly what you're saying, like he's one of the best characters of the franchise. For me, it always falls short because I don't feel like they gave him enough. They gave him enough. His character is so great, but his actual writing and his role is just okay. Like it's good, but
yeah,
I don't know. It could have had more. I guess more. He had a lot of one-liners, right? He didn't have any monologues or extended.
That's true.
Dialogue scenes where you really got into him as a character.
That's true.
But yeah, he is way better than many of the more disposable characters throughout the franchise.
He has a lot of like character and spirit, and you know, Black people in horror movies usually don't fare well, and he fared well a lot longer, which I appreciated. But he also just like, you know, aside from Lawrence Fishburne, who plays one of the you know,
what medical actor that was.
Yeah. You know, you have
like he would have been the doctor or something. I mean, not old, like probably, but
yeah.
I wish he had a more pivotal role or something, or like come back in a more meaningful way because he's just kind of there.
Yeah.
But he is so great. Like it's like they didn't know what they had.
Hey, no, can you imagine?
This guy is gonna be a legend. You might not know it yet. To the Matrix, to everything in between. I mean, and what I like about him too as a person is he's one of these actors that's like a real working actor where they try to like constantly be working and they do like a ton of stuff. And maybe not all of it is like the most amazing thing, but their goal is to be a working actor.
Right.
First and foremost. Another one of those is like Malcolm McDowell. Like he has just worked and like, I don't know, there's just something cool about that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Lawrence Fishburne's portfolio, it is extremely varied, and Yeah, I mean, I'm just more recently, I'm thinking of the work he did in Hannibal, which was absolutely outstanding. But yeah, I mean, you like literally have Morpheus walking through Freddy's dreamscape. It's so surreal to look at it in
Yeah.
hindsight. But it's the
Yeah.
same thing with Patricia Arquette too. I
A lot
mean,
of wasted potential there.
yeah, absolutely.
This movie had more than its fair share of wasted potential.
Oh yeah, 100% agree with you. I mean, Patricia Arquette does a great job. She has that very like innocent kind of, you want to know what's going on behind those eyes type of
Yes.
ethereal presence to her in this
100.
movie. And yeah, so what an asset. I mean, they had an, for all intents and purposes, they had an extraordinary cast talent wise. A lot of that was squandered.
Well, it's so interesting that you can see all of her talent in this first role, because sometimes if
Right?
you go that far back in an actor's career, everything is not evident. But
Right.
every like her whole her specialness is completely on display, even in this film. And there's just something behind those eyes, like you said, that just makes her a great actor and a great star. And I've just
Yeah.
loved her since. But
I wanted to ask you what you thought of their giving us Freddy's origin story in this movie, and what did you think of said origin story? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
where is his origin story?
So throughout the movie, we have not Bill Maher having these visions of a nun,
Oh,
right?
the nun with the
This
mom.
Sister Mary Helena, yes.
It's problematic. I mean, there's a couple things that when they happen, you're like, oh, I see what's gonna happen. And like with her, it's like, oh, she's like, there was a girl who was locked in here. We're like, yeah, it's you. We know it's you. And then so you see that coming a mile away. And then there's another one too that like, oh, when Heather Langenkamp, Nancy's dad, comes back and like, honey, I just wanted to say goodbye. You're like, we know that's Freddie because
The
it's too.
that whole ghost dad thing was so horrible.
Yeah, it was horrid. The only thing cool about it was that it became fresh.
Right.
But so to me,
He literally looked like a Disney princess, like, or like the fairy
right.
godmother. There was like glitter. Like what? No.
Yeah. What?
What?
But back to what you mentioned about Amanda Kruger.
Yes.
I think the actress is a great choice. I thought she was really powerful and great. I like that she was a nun. I like that she I don't know, something was off. Something was off in the portrayal or how they filmed it, where she should have felt a little more ghost-like in some way. And I don't know, something was just kind of off. She seemed like I don't know, just something was just off. It felt really forced. It felt like they dropped a narrative into this film that they had already written. Like just
Yeah.
like the Dream Warrior stuff, it's an amalgamation of parts that aren't blended seamlessly.
Named. So that aside, because I want to get back to that.
Mm-hmm.
But that aside, like this kind of like Deus ex machina like trope that we see in storytelling. Okay, let's put that over here for a second. What did you think about how Freddy came to be? Like that he was.
That's problematic, big time.
Say more. Say more.
Okay, first of all, no one wants backstory of Freddy more than me and you. You know that. We
Right.
love the backstory for Freddy. We love Freddy, and we want to hear more about Freddy. And
Right.
actually, in Freddy's Dead, you get a way better backstory with actual footage of him with his little daughter and how she grows up. That's way better in terms of backstory. And even in Freddy's Nightmares, the TV show, episode 1, pilot episode, the way that they show his entire backstory in real time,
Right.
not as a flashback, but they tell it.
Right.
And yes, it's for TV, no budget, blah, blah, blah. Still really well done.
Still brilliant.
Considered.
Yes. Yes.
This, not so much because she's just telling the story, but if you really focus in on the words, what's it saying? So just because one of your parents is evil, you're going to turn out evil. And they almost make it seem too like the more people raped her, the eviler that one seed of the one person who got to the ovary with
Right.
the sperm was going to be more evil because more people had contributed to it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's really faulty logic. So to me, no, it's a house of cards.
Yes, and thank you for saying that, because you kind of articulated something that I hadn't really fully fleshed out. Like, first of all, again, we're very good at taking off our 2021 glasses, okay? But it's really hard sometimes to, like, okay, a woman is raped by a bunch of psychopaths in an asylum. Okay, you have me. You have me. I'm with you. Did she need to be raped 100 times? Like,
Right.
wouldn't
I
one
think
psychopath
if
raping
you
her
don't,
have been
right. To me, here's how I think of it. If you don't think about it, it just sounds more evil. But
right?
the more you think about it, the
Ridiculous.
more it falls apart quickly.
Yes.
But audiences back then, popcorn flick, maybe they just were like, whatever. But
Right.
no, you're messing with an icon. You're
Yes.
messing with an anthology here. They maybe didn't know that, but they brought him back in a big way with this film. And then this film, I think, is the reason that Freddie became from maybe like a film icon to a cultural icon.
Oh yeah.
Where
Oh
he's
yeah.
in every Kmart. He's in every,
Kmart, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and at the risk of being, I'm not even gonna apologize for it. I'm gonna stop apologizing for it. You can tell that this shit was written by men, because one rape would have been enough. But
one rape is enough, boys.
Like, one rape by a psychopath in a mental asylum is enough for us to believe that Freddie was born evil. But
great point.
100, you had to, like, they just wouldn't have.
You could even argue that one rape would have even somehow could have played worse.
Yes.
Depending on how it's depicted. You could have made it even darker with just one rape.
Amen. Absolutely. I do, like, as a fan, we are so thirsty for, like, origin stories, but what do you, like, and we do get a better execution of that with part 6, but just generally speaking, when it comes to characters, more specifically villains, like, what do you feel about, like, does knowing how they came to be detract from their like the power of their evil? Like, too much is revealed and it's like, yeah, we want to know, but, like, do we really want to know? Because now it's like, okay.
I think it's a really tricky area, a really, really tricky area. It's almost never executed properly. And I think it's because the people who created said characters almost immediately lose interest and have a hard time staying faithful to their own creation in a lot of ways.
Yes.
A la Ridley Scott with Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I mean, that was just a disaster. I mean, now looking back, we can certify it as a disaster because it just hasn't aged well. History hasn't been kind to it. It just, not to go off on that whole tangent, but as an example, I just think it's really difficult. I think the right people always have to be involved to, like, pull it off, and it's almost impossible to. In a lot of ways, the mystery is what makes it so intriguing, right? The mystery is what is the element that intrigues you, that makes you imagine, that makes you think, that makes you fantasize, that stirs the imagination. And when you remove that, it's almost never going to be what any one individual had pictured it to be.
Right.
So it's always going to be at odds with people's imagination, which is boundless and personal, right? Your imagination's personal. So you're going to make it what's scary to you, which is different from what's scary to me or her or him. So yeah, it's a really tricky area. And I think it's cavalierly tampered with constantly. And I just hate that.
I love you. You just broke out cavalierly. But you took us to church because you're naming it. I will say, and I don't know if this is a popular or an unpopular opinion, but in terms of our top three, our Jason Voorhees, our our Michael Myers, and our Krueger, I think the one person who executed backstory really well was Rob Zombie. Um, I know people either love that or
Yeah,
hate that whole thing, but I think he did a really good job with the whole project, but that specifically. But yes, I mean,
yeah,
it's
but
so much.
if you notice, in that instance, he almost had to reinvent it. Like, it was in, I think it was, some liberties were taken. It was like a
Yes,
retelling. It wasn't like, let's go back to this character from this 70s film by John Carpenter. And
right.
it's this exact thing, which is almost really always what the fans want. We want the real authentic
Oh,
thing.
gee.
We want Prometheus to feel like it's going to lead right into Alien. We want that. And when you tease that and don't give it to us,
Right.
a lot of
And
upset fan people.
and to your point, that's also why, Prometheus and Covenant in our shared opinions don't work, even as asides, right? We know they're
Right.
not formal prequels or sequels. They're like this, they're over here. But even as like over here's, they still don't work because they're trying to explain too much.
Yeah.
And it goes back to like what you were talking about, like your imagination is going to fill in the blanks in a way that somebody handing you the mythology is never going to meet the expectation. And just like with Alien, where in the first one and even in part two, we have this perfect organism that is just evil, if you want to call it evil, but it's a perfect killing machine. There's
Right.
no rhyme or reason. We don't know why. It just fucking is, and that's okay, and that's terrifying. Fred was that, and then you get like throughout the franchise
Yeah.
more and more like, well, this is why he's that way. Okay, fine. I'm here
Right.
for it, but it's also like why can't he just be like this crazy fucking ghost pedophile? Like that's scary enough.
The most interesting thing is always the first encounter with said entity, right? Because it's just, it's new and it's more mysterious and it's out of the blue and you're still getting used to it and your mind is running wild. It's more,
Yeah.
it's going to be more captivating.
Yeah. So I wanted to just a couple final thoughts, unless you have anything else that we've missed or like that I'm not thinking about
Um,
before we get to like the final kind of closing act of what happens in the movie.
I know that I'm missing things, but nothing important. I'll probably think about it later, but wrap us up. I'm good.
Okay, so actually I did forget to mention something that I did put a huge asterisk by, which is when Sister Mary Helena, or Amanda Kruger Freddy's mother, is telling not Bill Maher who she is and how Freddy came to be. She does actually say this wonderful thing that I was kind of shaken by, that this was written by a man, but she says, and she's describing the setting of where she was when she was assaulted. She says this was, quote, a purgatory fashioned by the hands of men. And I thought that was just a beautiful
Wow.
line of dialogue. And
That is good.
it's ironic because it does contrast with the misogyny of like, oh, she had to have been also raped 100 times. But
Right.
that the inclusion of that line, this is a purgatory fashioned by the hands of men, I was like, yes, Amanda, yes, mommy.
It's almost like they were struggling to articulate
Yeah.
the depth of his evil, and they made a mistake by going too far
Yeah.
in a certain area that just
Agreed.
age well. That's how I look at it. I'm with you 100%.
So we know that we lose Nancy. Nancy dies at the end. Spoiler alerts. Nancy dies at the end of Dream Warriors. She does have this epic battle with Daddy, and she
Yeah.
penetrates. She penetrates Daddy with his own hand, which Mama was here for, but he takes her down with him.
Logistically, like, that would have taken a lot of effort for like a smaller female or smaller any gender, because we woke. How woke are we gonna get? Hopefully not too woke, but
Not too woke.
for a smaller person on to come from behind to a bigger person and stab them hard through all of the skin, stomach, everything with blunted blades like that. I mean, I don't know if that's possible at all, actually, but
Mama had enough.
Whatever. She did it. She pulled it off. And what I love about her dying in this one is how creatively they were able to bring her back as herself.
Yes.
I think she's even better as herself in New Nightmare than she is as Nancy.
Yes.
We
love a meta moment too.
There's a realness to her just being this actress who's on the sidelines, who's not a superstar, like in the scene of New Nightmare where, and we'll get to it in New Nightmare, but when they're on the talk show, right, and he comes out, she doesn't know he's going to come out the way he does,
right,
and feels the spotlight literally, and see her like give a side eye, like, here we go again,
right,
the side girl or whatever. And there's a lot of that in her interviews. Actually, if you watch a lot of Heather Langenkamp interviews, she talks about how like there's never a Nancy doll. It's always like the Freddy action.
doll.
There's never like a trick-or-treater that comes to her house as Nancy. It's always like as Freddy. And she's joking, of course, but there's a lot of truth in that too. And like you said, chef's kiss to Heather Langenkamp.
Yeah, because she is a fucking icon, and she is the Ripley. At the risk of comparing, making another analogy to Alien, she is like one of the original Scream queens, and she's happens to be a fantastic fucking actress. And yes, like if we ever have children, they will dress up as, certainly as Freddy, but definitely we'll have a Nancy in there too.
We got to throw in a Nancy.
Yeah,
great documentary called I Am Nancy that explores all this in depth, and it's hilarious. But
and it's also, even though it's in jest, like, she is speaking a truism in her truth, which is it speaks to
fanboy culture.
Well, yeah, but also like internalized misogyny that we all have, which is that, I mean, you even see it you see it less so with Ripley because, it's her against an alien. But with Heather Langenkamp, it's like, why aren't people dressing up as her? Why isn't she as prominently featured in action figures or this, that, and the other as Fred?
And I want to get into it a little bit. I think it's because, like, I think you can't equivocate Ripley and Heather Langenkamp's Nancy, because Ripley was more of I think Ripley was a newer concept of a female action star in 1979 than in 84 when Nightmare came around. She was in the wake of Ripley, right? There's that. Yes. Not only was she in the wake of Ripley, but let's talk about how she was in the wake of Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, right? She was an incredible scream queen who was really strong against Michael Myers and gave an incredible acting performance in the first Halloween film. So I think there's some diminishing returns by the time you get to Nancy. Not only that, but she's not in every Nightmare film. She's not even in the second one. She's in the third one, and they skip her again for like 3 films.
Right.
You're right. There's a lot of diminishing returns and a lot of factors that work against her.
Yeah, and thank you for articulating those, because that had not occurred to me, and she is coming in the wake of others.
All that said, I love her so much that, damn it, people start dressing up as her, start making more dolls of Nancy, more action figures.
Yes.
Because just for me personally, she's one of my favorites.
And we know NECA is definitely not watching this, and NECA is no longer making Nightmare merch, but NECA, if anybody here knows somebody that's like a second cousin of somebody that works for NECA, like, let's get a Heather Langenkamp, like let's do this properly.
I have your in with NECA right here.
Yeah, this is your guy. Right? Yeah. You need to write a strong word and make sure they get her fucking hair right, okay?
Yeah, and it should be real hair.
It should
not
be
that plastic hair. No,
real. So I wanted to touch on one final thing, kind of circling back to kind of the mythology and philosophy of the franchise and of what Dream Warriors does to further that. And it's this is a movie like I've seen several times, but I can't really make heads or tails of how and when Fred can kind of leave the dream world and start manipulating the real world. Like in this, we see his bones do that, but we also were unclear on even part one at the end. Is that a dream, or is he piercing the liminal realm? Like, is he moving between realms?
I am so glad you just talked about his bones, because the number one fail of this movie is that Amanda Kruger says you have to bury his bones on hallowed ground. Yep. And they don't do that.
He just splashes some holy water.
That's not hollow ground. That's holy water. Different thing.
Not the same thing. Yeah.
They literally bury him a foot from where he was. What is the point of that? You went all this way with this guy, this drunk ass John Saxon, into the heart of this thing, which he said is going to be a while. And then they took him forever to find it. And then you take him out of the trunk and bury him in the ground. Not hollowed ground, because that's not a cemetery. That's not blessed ground. Nope. Not hollow ground, which Amanda Kruger explicitly said hollow ground. That is a fail in this movie.
And that's probably why Daddy keeps coming back, because these people can't get their fucking shit together.
Like, you would think he would pay attention.
You would think. One would hope.
Or death.
One would hope. But you know what? And the fact that not Bill Maher is the only one left alive at the end of this movie is deeply upsetting to me. Just because he's a shite actor. But I want to talk about one final thing, which is the house, the Elm Street iconic house, which brilliantly this film opens with Patricia Arquette's character Kristen paper macheing the Elm Street house, and then it pans out and we realize that she's in a dream, right? She doesn't live at the Elm Street house like Nancy did, or the what's his face did in part 2. So
they never fully explain that, but she must be. So Nancy says you all are the last of the Elm Street children. Right. You know how children are born in generations. Like you have the eldest child, the middle child, the young child. So we're going. Nancy was in the elder generation. Now these kids are obviously a generation younger than her.
Right.
So where does it end? It's a little murky.
It's a little murky. Yeah. It's
like those families on Elm Street who initially
killed Daddy
alive. Forever, as they have children, those children will be haunted, but then it ends there, or does it continue on with their children's children? Like, who knows? And is Kristen and all these new kids, are they living on Elm Street or just in the same city?
I would imagine that it doesn't matter where they are anymore. If they're part of the Elm Street lineage, we can assume that Freddy is tethered to them, because we know that they said that they were dreaming of him before they met. And we know that Patricia Arquette's Kristen doesn't live in the house. So
it must be in that same town, because
maybe but they do make it a point in the franchise to say that there's an Elm Street in every town.
Yeah, but they don't say that until Freddy's dead.
No, they said it in this. They said it in Dream Warriors.
Are you sure? Because in the behind the scenes stuff, they talk about how either.
No, maybe I'm hearing that from Never Sleeps Again. Sorry.
Yeah, hearing that from Never Sleeps Again. That line was written for this film, but it wasn't used until the 5th film or whatever.
But there's this amazing scene in the 3rd act of Dream Warriors where they're all in this collective dream, which in and of itself is a beautiful thing to explore, like this group dream. It's very Jungian. It speaks to the collective un and subconscious. But anyways, you have all of the main protagonists in this collective dream trying to kill Fred. And they're already in this, they're asleep, they're dreaming. And then you have an inception moment, which I totally never really realized. But it cuts to Patricia Arquette's Kristen making the same paper mache house that the movie opens with. So you have a literal dream within a dream. And I was just like taken aback by that because I had not seen this since probably before Inception came out. And I was like, this is a literal layered dream that we're seeing.
Yeah.
It's beautifully executed. And then the final shot of the movie is not Bill Maher sleeping, after everybody's dead. And you see that same paper mache house is on his nightstand and the light goes on. It doesn't even make any sense either.
It is a cool ending visually, the light coming on. And you notice when the light comes on in the house, it illuminates the dream doll that Nancy. So that was at Nancy's house, though. So why would he have her dream doll?
I don't know.
And then the house from Kristen, which was at the hospital, why would he have gotten those things and then put them together by his bed?
No sense is made. But you know what I realized?
And another thing. When Heather is visiting one of the kids, after she's already fired, I think, in the hospital, Freddie writes on his chest with his claws.
Yeah.
And Nancy's the only one in the hospital visiting him.
Right.
So when he leaves, do they assume she cut his chest? Like the doctor?
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Whatever.
They're just like, oh, whatever. She cut this kid. It's not a big deal.
This is Sims, and then the guy that runs the hospital. Right. They never come back for Nancy. Like, well, I guess she dies anyway. But
yeah, that's a major plot hole.
She's like, I'm just gonna cover this up and leave.
Yeah, who wrote "Come and Get Me, Bitch" on his chest?
I know. Well, they would assume it was her because in the logs, she was the one there visiting. And they're not going to assume it's some dream demon.
Again, this movie's not winning any Critics' Choice Awards. But that same Malaysian dream doll that's in this movie, I was Googling it to learn more about it. And it appears in Batman Forever, too. Nicole Kidman as Bruce Wayne's psychiatrist / love interest, Chase Meridian, gives Bruce Wayne a Malaysian dream warden doll as well. So just like as an aside, a fun tidbit of trivia, it shows up in that movie as well. But the ending doesn't make any sense. But I like the house. I like the idea of that, like the doll house and the light coming on, because clearly he was not buried on hallowed ground. So Daddy is still somehow tethered to.
Although I just feel that like that's an error in the script. It wasn't intentional that he wasn't buried on hallowed ground. That's like they done messed up in their writing.
Well, we'll have to write a strongly worded letter. I mean.
Well, you close us out.
I am just I just love Daddy so much, and I think like this movie gives you comedic Daddy with one-liners, and you get a lot of like Robert Englund at his sexiest and at his most charismatic, which, at the end of the day, why are we obsessed with this franchise? It's because of Robert Englund and Nancy and Heather Langenkamp, but Freddie's charisma, which we know that most evil men, most evil serial killers are successful because they are charismatic and they lure you in. Robert Englund executes this so well. And of course, this movie certainly moves the plot forward and the mythology forward.
They educate people about serial killers, and they say, don't go to your car alone late at night on a college campus, that kind of thing. They say to them, this will be someone who looks trustable, who looks clean, who looks maybe handsome, who you wouldn't mind helping out if they said, hey, can you give me a hand? Right. And before you know it, you're being pulled into a van and killed. Yeah, so it's like, it's always, there seems to be a charismatic component to a lot of these serial killers.
Yes, and it's another necessary, upsetting reminder that men are very dangerous creatures. Please don't take offense if you are a man watching this, or to my partner in crime, Chad. Clearly, it's not all men. I'm not even going to go there, but it's a reminder that the rape elements of the franchise, the invasion of your dreams, of your safe
Yeah.
spaces, of your subconscious, the penetrative horror that is suggested in this franchise is just beautifully executed. And it's a very sobering reminder to women, but it's also um, just an absolutely beautiful way to get lost in such a rich mythology. And you have God, holding your hand and leading you through these 7 films. So we will be back with part 4, Dream Masters, and
And bad title.
yeah, well, Rennie Harlan. I don't know. I mean, I'm just gonna say Rennie Harlan. You do it that way you will. But we'll be back with 4, and then of course the rest of the franchise. So as always, like, subscribe, comment. You know the drill. Don't forget to check out Chad's amazing music catalog. His website will be linked below, as will his YouTube channel, Giger's Alien, where he does the most epic unboxings of NECA characters, limited edition, and his Facebook group of the same name. So everything will be linked down below. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you on the other side. Cheers.
Welcome to prime time, bitch.